Now, throughout this country's history, we've had conflict, we've had tumult, but we've never had a tyrant as the commander-in-chief. And that is not by coincidence. It's because the American people have always been willing to speak up and exercise their First Amendment right to protest, especially when our fundamental rights have been threatened.
Hi again, everyone. It's now 5 o'clock in the East. It is the basis for our existence as the country that we are. It's the basis for the country's founding, that there would be no king, no queen, no monarch, no dictator or autocrat ruling our country. It would be a nation of the people, by the people, for the people, people who have rights outlined in the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights, which is why when Donald Trump in 2020 reportedly wanted the U.S. military to shoot unarmed protesters in the legs, it was so stunning and scandalous and jaw-dropping even for the Trump White House. These were Americans exercising their First Amendment rights, and the president at the time wanted his military to violently attack them by shooting them. That account of the president's thinking came from someone very close to him, his own defense secretary at the time, Mark Esper. Watch.
I thought that we're at a different spot now. He's going to finally give a direct order to deploy paratroopers into the streets of Washington, D.C., and I'm thinking with weapons and bayonets. And this would be horrible.
What specifically was he suggesting that the U.S. military should do to these protesters?
He says, can't you just shoot them? Just shoot them in the legs or something. And he's suggesting that that's what we should do, that we should bring in the troops and shoot the protesters.
The commander-in-chief was suggesting that the U.S. military shoot protesters.
Yes, in the streets of our nation's capital. That's right. Shocking.
So that really happened. But importantly, it's happening again. Donald Trump is in office again without Mark Esper or anyone like him who would constrain him from that. With armed military troops now deployed to the streets of Los Angeles, we cannot forget Mark Esper's words there. Take a look at this stunning moment on Capitol Hill earlier when Congresswoman Elissa Slotkin questioned the man who now holds Esper's post. Senator Elissa Slotkin questioned the man who now holds Esper's job, Pete Hegseth.
Have you given the order to be able to shoot at unarmed protesters in any way? I'm just asking the question. Don't laugh. Like the whole country. And by the way, my colleagues across the aisle.
What is that based on? What evidence would you have that an order like that has ever been given?
Giving that order to your predecessor, to a Republican Secretary of Defense, who I give a lot of credit to because he didn't accept the order. He had more guts and balls than you because he said, I'm not going to send in the uniformed military to do something that I know in my gut isn't right. He was asked to shoot at their legs. He wrote that in his book. That's not hearsay. So your poo-pooing of this, it just shows you don't understand who we are as a country, who we are. And all of my colleagues across the aisle, especially the ones that served, should want an apolitical military and not want citizens to be scared of their own military. I love the military. I served alongside my whole life, so I'm worried about you tainting it. Have you given the order? Have you given the order that they can use lethal force against honor? I want the answer to be no. Please tell me it's no. Have you given the order?
Senator, I'd be careful what you read in books and believing it, except for the Bible.
Oh, my God. So your former predecessor, I guess that's not enough for you.
That moment is where we start the hour with Senator from Michigan, Senator Elissa Slotkin. Thank you so much for being here. I am a student of that paragraph of that book, of that chapter in American political history, of all the people who are in the room. And if you could just help me relive that moment. I mean, it is written about by Mark Esper. It's a standoff in the Oval Office with Stephen Miller. Mark Milley was in the Oval Office as well. And it is about invoking the Insurrection Act. It's about using the military in historic ways. Tell me what you think when you can't get the current Secretary of Defense to tell all of us and you that that'll never happen.
Yeah, I think the thing that you want him to give a simple answer, right? And in other questions, he gave a simple answer. But there just seems to be this impossibility for him of just saying, look, I'm going to protect and defend the Constitution. I'm never going to execute an illegal order. I love the military, and so I'm never going to let that happen, because he's so devoted to Donald Trump. He doesn't want to do anything that gets him in more trouble. And it just, you think about Secretary Esper when he was, in those important conversations with the president. Your character really matters. These things really matter. And what if he hadn't had that character? What if that Secretary of Defense had gone out and said, you know what, all these peaceful protesters, just shoot at them to get them to move. They're making the president look weak. We'd be in a very different moment right now. So I think it's deeply frustrating, especially for me as someone who served at the Pentagon, worked alongside the military. I don't want Americans to live in fear of their own military.
Well, and the military doesn't want that either. I mean, just explain the dynamic for the National Guard in any state, but right now we have them in LA. They are largely from the community they're now patrolling. What is that like for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think, right, the National Guardsmen are dentists and doctors and construction workers and people who either served before or want to serve in a part-time capacity when they're, and in addition to having a full-time job. So they very much are of the community. And I got a lot of staff and former staff that are Guardsmen, and they have almost no training on how to do things in a law enforcement context. That's the thing that we're sort of missing here. It's not just about uniformed folks showing up in a city. It's about what are they trained to do, especially a Marine, right? An active duty Marine. They are trained to go after the enemy in a ruthless way, and we like that. That's a positive thing where we're dealing with adversaries abroad. But it's a very different thing to bring that same Marine into an urban setting. They've had, as we heard the head of the Marine Corps say, 2 hours of training on law enforcement techniques. It's just a very different approach to the world, and you don't want mistakes. You don't want them getting jittery and shooting at someone by mistake and causing a bigger problem. So it's not just about the letter of the law. It's about the training that the military has or doesn't have in the kinds of things we're asking them to do.
A former senior military official told me that it's that piece, but it's also the self-selection. The people who go into the military for a reason, that if they wanted to patrol and protect, they would pursue law enforcement. And sometimes at the beginning of their careers, they're at a fork in the road. But just talk about what we're putting the men and women of the military through right now to even be debating their deployment on the streets of American cities.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, like you said, people sign up for the military for a bunch of reasons, but usually because they want to serve their country. They want to protect us from harm. They don't want attacks in the homeland. They want to protect us. And so that is a very different job description than policing streets, than detaining and arresting people, than trying to control unarmed protesters when you haven't had that non-lethal force training. So I don't think that the average person, I know they don't sign up to do that. I think that officer you spoke to was right, that you could go into law enforcement if that's what you want to do and get the right training. But I think the thing that, again, I tried to highlight in the testimony is, we want to look at our uniformed men and women and say, that's someone who's here to make me safe. That's not someone I fear. And by putting the military in these positions, in these adversarial roles, they are risking politicizing them and making them seem like just a political wing of this president, when in fact they swear an oath to the Constitution, not to any one man. So it concerns me. I'm from Michigan, right? And the National Guard was called in 1967 in Detroit during our riots. The riots were bad. No one disputes that. But the National Guard coming in made it worse because they didn't have the training. It went on for days, and people still talk about it and remember that. So I don't want that for the whole rest of the country.
So as a woman who's covered the Trump era for 9 years, I cannot let another moment go by without asking you about saying something out loud that people say off TV all the time, that none of them has the balls to do the right thing. What is your assessment of why Hegseth is so afraid of Trump?
I think everybody, a lot of these political appointees have been very concerned about doing anything that would anger them because they know they'd lose their job. right? They know they'd have their nomination pulled. And there's varying degrees of it. And for Secretary Hegseth, he has always been the most nervous, most concerned, most hedging, most agitated when you ask him a straight up question about the Constitution. It's noticeable. And then he's had a rough first few months, right? He's in the spotlight. We're talking more about his conduct and his behavior and use of signal for war plans than we are about the leadership. And I think that makes him even more concerned. But again, these shouldn't be hard questions. And frankly, the 4-star general sitting next to him, we went through General Kane, when we went through his confirmation hearing, he could answer those questions. No, I won't accept an illegal order. I swear an oath to the Constitution. He answered it straight. And that's all we're asking for from the man who controls the entire U.S. military.